announcing a radical new claim of presidential power that is not afforded by the Constitution and that has never been attempted in American history, even by George W. Bush and Dick Cheney.
Governor Romney, as president, would you have signed the National Defense Act as written?
Yes, I would have.
Will incarcerate people preventively. Preventive incarceration. Indefinite detention without trial. That's what this is.
The power for indefinite detention of U.S. citizens.
And when they say, I want my lawyer, you tell them, shut up.
Your time is
expired. Get a lawyer. You're an enemy combatant.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law
must do so with an abiding confidence in the rule of law.
The rule of law
Was defending positions that undermine the rule of law.
Rule of law.
To ensure that they are in line with the rule of law.
The rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be.
Those weapons of mass destruction have got to be somewhere.
We have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
How can a president speak the kind of poetry that President Obama does about the rule of law?
The rule of law.
And call for the power to indefinitely, preventively imprison people because they might commit crimes in the future.
He said he would veto it. Did he? No. President Obama signed it into law on New Year's Eve when everybody was partying.
Kit told the New York Times today, quote, "We've known this was on the horizon for many years, but we were able to hold it off with George Bush. The idea that we might find ourselves fighting with the Obama administration over these powers is really stunning." And it is stunning, particularly to hear President Obama claim the power to keep people in prison indefinitely.
If you're a journalist and you interview someone who's suspected of terrorism, now you are aiding and abetting Al-Qaeda or associated forces, and so you go to jail for it. So a judge listens to that argument and issues an injunction saying, okay, until we can get clarification on this, you cannot use that power. Obama lawyers continue to fight it. The administration's lawyers go back to the judge and go back to the judge. And at one of those hearings, a judge asks them, are you using this power? And they won't tell her.
Creepy, right? With no charges against them, no conviction, no sentence, just imprisonment. It's particularly stunning to hear him make that claim in the middle of a speech that was all about the rule of law. How can those two things coexist in the same man, even in the same speech? Well, that brings us to the self-consciously awkward, embarrassing part of this speech today. After condemning the Bush administration for what he called their ad hoc legal strategy, for trying to make things seem legal that patently weren't, this is what President Obama proposed.
My administration has begun to reshape the standards that apply to ensure that they are in line with the rule of law.
And the rule of law, a new world order where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
With the rule of law. And so going forward, my administration will work with Congress to develop an appropriate legal regime so that our efforts are consistent with our values and our Constitution.
You'll construct a legal regime to make indefinite detention legal. You will, what does he say? Develop an appropriate legal regime. So you can construct a whole new system outside the courts, even outside the military commissions, so that you can indefinitely imprison people without charges. And you'll build that system from scratch. How long would President Obama's proposed preventive indefinite detention last? Well, he's not saying yet, but here's how he defines the threat that he says makes indefinite detention necessary.
Right now, in distant training camps and in crowded cities, there are people plotting to take American lives. That will be the case a year from now, 5 years from now, and in all probability 10 years from now.
10 years from now. So you could get arrested today and locked up without a trial, without being convicted, without being sentenced for, say, 10 years.
The indefinite detention clause is unconstitutional, and she strikes it. All right, way to go. So President Obama got what he wanted, right? Because he says that he knew that a judge at some point would find it unconstitutional, they would rule it was unconstitutional, and so the judge is just giving him what he said was going to be the case. The problem is the very next day, Obama administration lawyers file an appeal to that ruling. And the following Monday, an appellate court judge reinstates Section 1021. Puts it back into power.
One of the most radical proposals for defying the Constitution that we have ever heard made to the American people. Last night on this show, NBC national investigative correspondent Michael Isikoff broke a big story for NBC News about the Obama administration and its counterterrorism policies. He broke the story ahead of this Thursday's confirmation hearings for the president's new choice for CIA director, John Brennan. Mr. Brennan was, of course, once the deputy executive director of the CIA during the Bush years. He's now President Obama's counterterrorism advisor at the White House. But if he is to run the CIA for President Obama, John Brennan is first going to have to face questions on Thursday about some of what Michael Isikoff turned up here on this program last night. A Justice Department white paper elaborating the administration's reasoning for why it thinks it is legal to kill American citizens on the president's say-so. Or actually, on the say-so of an informed high-level official of the U.S. government. So maybe that's the president, but maybe that's somebody else. Michael Isikoff's scoop ended up at the New York Times today and the Washington Post and The Hill and Slate and Salon and the AP, just to name a few. It was everywhere. And then at a press conference today, the Attorney General was asked about it.
Last night, NBC reported a white paper that was prepared by the Justice Department, undated, unsigned, about the legal pinnacles for targeting Americans overseas. Could you please give us what the precise definition is and how that would be carried out?
Well, there are a series of speeches that I gave, Jay Johnson gave, John Brennan gave, where we tried to lay out for the American people the considerations that go into the operations. We say that we only take these kinds of actions when there's an imminent threat.
Mr. Attorney General, you brought up the phrase imminent threat. Is that the same as an ongoing threat, or is there a difference between those two?
Well, I mean, you know, some of these things are fact-based, and I can't necessarily get into the weeds or kind of parse these things. You can't, I think, examine these terms without having a reference to the facts.
The facts. These things are based on facts. Facts that I cannot tell you, so I cannot reference them because I cannot tell you them, but they are facts. Watch.
Why not release the memos? I mean, you were a driving force behind releasing the Bush administration's torture memos. Why aren't you a force for this?
Well, I mean, we'll have to, you know, look at this and see what it is we want to do with these memos. But you have to understand that we are talking about things that go into really kind of how we conduct our offensive operations.
Right. Exactly. They go into how you conduct your offensive operations. That's the thing we want to know about.
This memo, the memo doesn't seem to be classified, though, right? It was marked confidential but not classified. Why not release that to the general public? You said that you can only discuss that in a classified setting, but in this memo you're discussing the difference between those two. We're taking what sounds like an ongoing threat and saying that it's an imminent threat. Yeah, well, I mean, that's something we'd have to look into, you know, what's exactly in the white paper. We'd have to look into that. Are you not aware of what's in the white paper? We'll have to look into that.
You have to look into that. You know, your agency wrote it. Also, NBC put the whole thing online. Seriously, check it out. Super easy. We've linked to it at Maddow blog. You can just look at it there. It's 16 pages long, shorter than most articles in The New Yorker. Now, a bipartisan group of 11 U.S. senators has written to President Obama asking him to release what is still secret about why the administration and the president think that it is legal to kill Americans this way. Quote, "It is vitally important for Congress and the American public to have a full understanding of how the executive branch interprets the limits and boundaries of this authority so that Congress and the public can decide whether this authority has been properly defined and whether the president's power to deliberately kill American citizens is subject to appropriate limitations and safeguards." Honestly, in the real world, particularly in the real political world, there is some compunction, but very little compunction, about the president using extreme counterterrorism measures. The president using lethal force against bad guys. I mean, the case against the American whose killing seems to have inspired a lot of this secret legal reasoning. The case against Anwar al-Awlaki does not exactly tug at the heartstrings, right? U.S. citizen or not. As a senior recruiter for al-Qaeda, he was associated both with the mass shooting attack at Fort Hood in 2009 in Texas and with the attempted Christmas Day airliner attack, the underwear bombing, right? Later that same year. If we accept that the U.S. is at war with al-Qaeda, then it is not a stretch to believe that the U.S. would target a prominent al-Qaeda figure like Anwar al-Awlaki in that war. I mean, with some exceptions, the broad political and moral and legal issue here is not an issue with U.S. forces killing bad guys. The issue here is, who's a bad guy? And how do you figure it out? If this is the means by which we're going to decide, not that you're going to be arrested and tried, but the means by which we will decide whether the president can order you dead, then on what basis is the president making that decision? How do they determine who's a bad guy? Or as Oregon Senator Ron Wyden put it in a question, a written question to the president's CIA nominee, John Brennan, how much evidence does the president need to determine that a particular American can be lawfully killed? Following naturally on from that, and this is the one that keeps me up at night, does the president have to provide individual Americans with the opportunity to surrender before killing them? Does this obligation change if the president's determination that a particular American is a valid target has not been publicly announced or publicly reported? Think about that, right? If you're an American citizen and the president's going to kill you, do you have the right to give yourself up instead so you don't get killed? And how do you know you should do that if the president's decision that he's going to kill you is a secret decision that nobody ever tells you? And are we right, also, in only imagining this kind of thing happening in places like Yemen or Pakistan? Quoting again from Senator Wyden here, are there any geographic limitations on the intelligence community's authority to use lethal force against Americans? Do any intelligence agencies have the authority to carry out lethal operations inside the United States? Good question. Good questions. And now the question is whether the administration is going to make John Brennan field those questions alone before the Senate on Thursday at his confirmation hearing. Are they going to disclose anything else to provide answers to these questions before their nominee is forced to try to handle them alone on Thursday when his nomination is on the line? Tick-tock. The hearing is Thursday.